Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
welcome.
Andy, not quite.
Oh no, it says it's live on.
Okay, off you go. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Welcome to this briefing for members of the Environment Committee. I am Councillor Andy Stafford. I will be chairing this informal meeting. Due to the extreme weather temperature, this briefing is being held online instead of in person. This means that the meeting cannot be deemed to be a formal committee meeting under local government legislation. However, the committee can still discuss all the items on its agenda. Any items which the committee votes to support tonight will be formally proposed for approval by the Policy and Resources Committee at their meeting on the 25th of July 2022. Once a motion has been proposed and seconded, members will be asked to vote either for or against or indicate they wish to abstain by raising their hands. An officer will then announce the outcome of the vote. Please note this briefing is being streamed live on YouTube and recorded. Accordingly, anyone who speaks is deemed to have given consent to being recorded and for any recording to be broadcast or published. And I can see everyone's got their microphones on mute, so that's great if you're not speaking. So on to tonight's agenda. Do we have any appointments or substitutes?
There are no substitutes, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2, do we have any declarations of interest? I'm not seeing any, so none. I understand we have no public participation this evening.
That's right, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. The minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of June. Do we have any comments on those minutes, or are we happy that I can approve them? Everybody's nodding, no comments. Okay, so I'll take that as we're happy to approve the minutes. Okay, and we're on to agenda item 5, which is a proposal to introduce a subsidised domestic pest control service for Worcester City residents. So I'm going to hand over to Mark.
Chair, I'll, if you don't mind, I'll present the report, and
okay.
Mark is here just to assist with any questions about sort of delivery of the service. So, Chair, I'll keep this brief because I'm conscious that there's broad support, I think, for this proposal. So, in effect, this is a referral report from the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee to introduce a subsidised domestic pest control service for Worcester City. It was originally raised as part of the budget setting conversations for this year, and it was felt at that time there wasn't sufficient enough information. So it was asked to go to Licensing and Environmental Health Committee to look at how it would work in detail. And Licensing and Environmental Health Committee have supported the proposal, and that's why it's here tonight to you as Policy Committee for final approval. Appendix 1, Chair, really is the key document that sets out how the system would work and who it would focus on. So I would draw your attention straight away to that document. And as it says there, it lists out the residents and the eligibility around benefits. So anybody on that list, that first list of bullet points, anybody on those benefits would be eligible to the service, and we've added a couple of additional eligibility criteria in there, which brings it into line with other council services, including foster carers with foster children. And the other thing to note is, in order to bring the Worcester City service in line with neighbouring district service, we've also included wasps' nests in domestic settings or in close proximity to domestic settings, because that can have an impact on people's health and safety. And again, the very first part of the appendix just confirms that for anybody to be eligible for this, as well as needing to meet the benefit criteria, you would also need to be living within the district boundary of Worcester City Council. Chair, I'm going to take it that the bulk of the report has been read. So we've set out the reasons for delivery of the service. There were a couple of points raised at Licensing and Environmental Health Committee around making sure this gets to those residents in need. So we've extended the eligibility criteria, and we've also reassured members around the fact that there would be a real positive communications plan that will sit around delivery of the service, particularly focusing on those times of the year when pests may be more of an issue. And just in terms of the financial implications, Chair, when we reported to Licensing Environmental Health Committee, it was unclear of how this would be paid for. It now transpires that through an underspend in the 21-22 Worcester Regulatory Services budget, there is £41,000 that is due to come back to Worcester City Council from an overall WRS underspend. That's not been allocated, that's not been budgeted for this year, so that is free to use. I've consulted with Shane as Director of Finance, and he's confirmed that is the case. So what we're looking to do is to use that underspend to fund the implementation of this service for 2 years as of September. And then as part of budget setting in the next couple of months, we can then look to see how we can sort of fund this moving forward. So, Chair, I'm sure there are questions. Both myself and Mark are happy to answer, but I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, thank you, Lloyd. Do we have any questions or people want to comment on this paper? Robin?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. Just 2 questions, really. Which committee will be responsible? And forgive my ignorance on this one, I just don't know. Which committee would be responsible for overseeing this service? And how would they then? Would there be any performance report implications on this?
Chair, just to take the first one, so operational oversight of the service would be dealt with by the Worcester Regulatory Services Board. Pleased to note that the new Vice Chair of the board is on the call, Councillor Cronin. So there's a direct link between the board and this committee. So WRS board will be the first port of call, but this committee is the policy committee in effect for this area of work. So ultimate oversight would be with this committee. At the moment, delivery of this service or any KPIs associated with it are not in this year's performance report. But if members are minded to look at that, that's something we could build in for next year.
Thank you.
Marjorie?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to welcome this report and say that I'm really pleased to see that it's going ahead. And it's also great news that we found a source of funding for the first 2 years, so there won't be any budget implications for at least those first 2 years. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Richard, Chair. Richard, Councillor Udall.
Where is Richard? I can't see him on my screen. Oh, there you are.
I'm difficult to miss normally. Yeah.
You should wear something bright.
Okay, Chair, I think I'd better say something in my capacity as Chair of Licensing and Environmental Health. This did have quite an extensive discussion, and it wasn't unanimous. I think there was some opposition to the idea, which I can understand, especially in these difficult times for us as a local authority in our own finances. But I think the overwhelming view of the committee was this is a public health issue, and we did have concerns about some residents' ability to afford the issue of pest control if they're struggling between heating, eating, and pest control. Pest control may come down lower the list. And I particularly have concern about some people taking some less than savoury or even illegal methods to control pests if they can't afford to do it. There was also mention that we were considered to be exposed about Worcester being one of the only districts in the county not to have some sort of coverage. So I think overall what we're suggesting here is something which we can take forward and be proud about, because it's actually helping some of the most deprived communities in the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to pick up on the issue about where the oversight of this service will rest. because the idea came originally from licensing and environmental health, and I just draw attention to paragraphs 2.3 and 2.4 in the report, which I would say suggests that the overall oversight of this perhaps would be better left with the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee. I realise that we are in this position now because this is the budget setting process that covers it, but I'm not sure that this is the best committee to maintain general oversight.
Do you want me to respond, Chair?
Yes, please.
Chair, I think it's a matter for members. If members want the sort of regulatory committee to have oversight of it, then that's absolutely fine. There is no performance report for that committee. That's the point I was trying to make. This committee does have a performance report that's brought to it on a quarterly basis. Regulatory committee doesn't, but that's not to say that, you know, once a year, twice a year, we can have a report on how the pest control service is being delivered. So absolutely within the gift of members as to where you want that to sit.
Okay, thank you. Any?
Chair, I think Mark may want to come in on that point as well.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that annually the activity report in our WRS's ongoing data is presented to Licensing and Environmental Health Committee, and within that activity report, for those members who have seen that document, there is an element in there about subsidised pest control that we report on for all the 4 districts that currently provide that service. So Worcester City would be included in that, and then the dedicated Worcester City page would also have an element of subsidised pest control treatments in there as well.
Okay. Is that everybody?
Councillor Udall again, Chair.
Oh, I'm really not good at spotting these things, am I? Richard.
I think I was going to say very much what Mark Cox has just said. I think the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee does receive the annual report and can make comments upon it, but the Environment Committee is clearly the one which actually sets the budget and has got financial responsibility for the service. So I think it's a joint responsibility. I think Licensing and Environmental Health will have a role, as will Environment Committee. It's just knowing where to separate those roles.
Yeah, sounds sensible. Okay, so on the basis I can't see any other hands up, so hopefully that I haven't missed any. I'd just like to say yeah, I'm a member of the licensing committee, and I know myself and members of my group did have reservations about this proposal, but I respect the decision that the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee made in approving it and wanting it to go forward. And also we found funding from the budget surplus for the first 2 years. So as chair of this committee, I'm happy to support this proposal. And on that basis, are we happy now to move to a vote on the recommendation as set out in 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3 of the paper? Can I please have a show of hands of everyone that's in support of those recommendations?
I can see 7-4, unless I can't see everybody. Owen, are you abstaining? Nida? Your hand up. So that's 1,
So
2,
yeah,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
8-4. I'm seeing
8-4. Abstention 1, 8, 9. But we're still. Was somebody else missing? We should, we've got 9 members, haven't we? That's correct. Sorry, Chair, we've got only got 9 members in attendance.
Okay,
That's
that's excellent.
carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to agenda item 6, which is the ward biodiversity delivery update. I'm assuming Sandra, you'll be. Sandra, or is it David?
Sandra.
It's me, David might chip in. Again, Chair, it's a report for noting, so I won't go through too much of the detail of the report. I'm sure the members have read it, but for those that are new to obviously the committee, the background around the biodiversity work that we're doing from an environmental operations point of view in city services is supporting that biodiversity action plan and looking at how we can create a more enhanced offer within the city. So in 2019, we did start some wildflower trials, which was more around the non-native stuff, looking at that seed mix, the wildflowers, to try and look at how that would look around the city. And it is very aesthetically pleasing, but it's something that we want to look at more of the native stuff as we're taking this forwards. It did take extremely well, and as you can probably see in Appendix A, it was chosen very well for its aesthetics, and it quite well bloomed in that seed bank, which takes normally around 3 to 5 years to obviously establish. In 2020, I suppose as COVID was starting a lockdown, we started a piece of work with the Worcester Environmental Group, and that we were looking at highlighting a particular area off Dugdale Drive in Warndon, and this was pretty well suited for that wildflower transformation. So again, in Appendix B, you can see that has the native impact, and it really looks a picture as you're walking through or going past that area. So based on that, in 2021, we then continued to follow on this process, and we've done a verge off Droitwich Road. Again, that has taken really well, and although it's in its early days, we're only seeing 12 months of that, it is looking really brilliant, and I'm sure people who have been past have commented on that. So obviously, as I mentioned, this links into that biodiversity action plan, and we want to obviously develop this and try and make everywhere as much as we can in areas across the city. And we're delivering this in 3 areas. We're looking at grass meadows, and you can see an example of that in Appendix C. We're also looking at the wildflower seeded areas and that they're maintained. And then also those native flowers. So we're looking at a combination across the area, dependent on the location and that landscape. And as you can see, that all the areas that we've currently worked on are in Appendix D. And that's not a final list. That is something that we're going to be developing year on, year out within our ops team, and looking at where we can work. So something that we'll be wanting to take forward is working quite closely with our elected members of areas that they feel is particularly good for us to pick up that native flowering. And again, it'll keep linking into that biodiversity action plan. The next steps that we're going to be also looking at is, as many of you are aware, we've got some green flag parks within the city, and they're based on a management plan. So we're going to adopt that approach to our wildflower biodiversity, and looking at that of how we can continue to work on that. So that is a big thing for us to be picking up over the next 12 months to 2 years. And we know that we were commissioned a piece of money that we're going to be looking at to maintain that land and look at that review as part of that action plan and a part of those management plans. Again, a big piece of work that we've just completed is we've been working with WEG to train up the operatives so that they can understand the reasons and the way that we are working and the locations that we're working towards and things that we're doing to enhance that biodiversity. So that will be taking that forward now over the next 12 months. I don't know if you have anything more you want to add to that, David.
No, nothing for me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Sandra, for that brief. Do I have any questions or comments from members? Marjorie?
Thank you. Just two. When I first saw the list of wards and what was happening, I did feel that my ward hadn't come out of it very well. But I'm very, very pleased to hear from Sandra that you know that there's going to be more wildflower areas and that you want members to get involved. And I must definitely, I'm very keen to get involved. The other point I wanted to raise was about butterflies. Obviously, one of the reasons for doing this is to benefit biodiversity in general, to increase the number of species in an area. Butterflies are very particular about where they lay their eggs, and I wonder if and this might be something that WEG has thought about, but I wonder if any thought has been given to trying to encourage butterflies, basically by planting particular plants that they like to lay their eggs on. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor. We are obviously looking at other areas, and this was our start of a 10, and it's something that we're going to develop over the time. So yeah, so I very much welcome your support and identifying areas. Obviously, in some wards, it's not conducive to looking at the native flower mix, and that's where we might look at that non-native mix and put those seeds in. But yeah, absolutely, we would love to work with you, and it'd be something that I'll take forward from this meeting. What we're doing with the WEG is looking at all of our pollinators and all of our new species. And I don't know if you saw a few weeks ago in social media, the orchid that we've not had in Worcester for some while. So that is something that we're definitely keen on developing, that it's not just around that flower mix, it's around that whole biodiversity, increasing the species and making it more a habitable place for people to grow, learn, develop, etc.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. And I could just add to that, Marjorie, that there's a lot going on in Purdeswell Park, and that will obviously benefit a lot of the residents at St Stephen's, because it's obviously technically in Claims, but St Stephen's ward sort of is on the boundary on at least two large sides of it. Plus, there's also been a fair amount of wilding work and biodiversity enhancement in Astwood Cemetery, which I know is not on this list, but could easily be included. It's just probably being done by a different team. Yes, but the WEG have been working with them.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, I've got Richard next, and I've got then you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to say how wonderful to see those wild daffodils behind Sandra. They are a bit late. I think the best of them are gone now, but it's good to see them. Good to see them in place. Just a few things of concern. I've had over the years a few complaints from people who think we're simply not maintaining areas. I do wonder where we are with educating people to make sure that they are aware that this is a deliberate policy to make sure that wildflower biodiversity actually can take place, because once that's explained, they seem to be pretty accepting of it. But there is a lot of lack of knowledge out there, and people assume it's council cutbacks, which is causing this to happen. Obviously, the future of Mecco Memorial Park is an area where this could happen in the future, but I also wonder whether we've worked with other providers of land or holders of land, such as Platform Housing Association, to see whether they've got any land which is available which can be used for this. Or more importantly, in St John's, for instance, the land around Earls Court Farm, which is managed by Betts Ecology, sorry, and they certainly have a lot of land which is left over for wildflower meadows, and I think they could probably do with some support and assistance as well to actually help and inform the residents in the area about what is going on.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Udall. Yeah, we're quite happy to work with partners. We've just started some dialogue with Sanctuary Housing, looking at how we take that forward. So I'm more than happy for anybody that is out there that we could support and assist. Happy to look at how we can work in partnership, because I think that would be really good. With regards to the education and getting that knowledge out there. In the report, there is the new signage that we have started to introduce, that we've done in conjunction with the WEG, which has, since we started installing, reduced the number of complaints we've seen significantly over the last couple of months. So we do feel that that is having a massive impact to explain that this is not a cost-cutting exercise. This is for the future, for you, for your children's futures, etc. So we do think that's going a long way. Something that we are working along with WEG is also the Wild About Worcester that Claire's quite heavily involved in, and the QR codes. So we're very keen to digitise this as well, because I think there's a lot of people with smartphones that can, you know, get the camera on it and get that information and understand. So it's a watching brief, and obviously we wanted to just update the committee today of where we're up to. But yeah, I think there's some really exciting times ahead for us.
Yeah, thanks, that's Sandra. And just to add to that, you know, the communication side is something we discuss in almost every briefing with officers, and it's seen as an ongoing requirement with social media and City Life always containing articles, and the WEG again with their communications and Facebook really getting that message out there. So it's definitely all going in the right direction as far as I can see. Simon, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify the presence of the non-native wildflower mix. Was that just confined to the 2019 trials, or are we still using them? And if so, is there an intention to phase that out in favour of the native flower species? I'm looking at Appendix D, which doesn't actually give us any information specifically as to whether those areas have been planted with non-native wildflowers or native ones.
I might be able to jump in here actually. I think again, hopefully maybe someone else might be correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the non-native means that you've taken seed from another area or from elsewhere, not saying they're all non-native species, whereas the more natural method is you're mowing and just seeing what grows that's already in that land. So just the flowers that have been suppressed by the grass, and as you cut and collect the grass doesn't do so well, and it allows what the flowers that are already in the ground that never get to grow to come through, rather than actually putting seed in. So I don't think it means we're planting non-native species. It's just seed that's come from elsewhere to give it a boost.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Councillor Cronin, we were going to continue to do a mix dependent on the locations and other factors of the biodiversity. So it will be a mixture. And as Councillor Staff has just said, it's basically the native flower is just leave it and let's see what pops up and grows, which is obviously the orchid that we've seen for the first time in Worcester, as opposed to us creating non-native species all the way through the city. And I think on Appendix D, you can see that we've obviously made desire lines so people can walk through the areas, but on the sides of that is what has grown because we haven't continued to mow or to cut and collect in those particular areas. So on the future we'll be continuing to look at a mixture of that. What I can do is I can go back and get Matt Bayliss to supply that information to the question of what has been native, what has been non-native, if you would like that.
If I can come back, yeah, thanks very much. That has clarified it. The reason I raised it was because of paragraph 2.4, where it says the non-native mix, whilst visually pleasing, is not as beneficial to nature as the native alternative. And with that in mind, there's obviously, I I would like to see a preference for the native alternative. I'm glad we're not importing them from the other side of the world, but I think that paragraph expresses my concern about that, and I hope that we can focus as much on the most appropriate native species to whatever area we're dealing with.
Absolutely, and I think as we get that message out more and that education out, and people understand why is it we're not cutting that particular area, I think we'll see more and more of those areas developing longer term.
Okay, I can't see any more speakers or people who want to ask questions. So is the committee happy to note the contents of that report? Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're on to agenda item 7, which is the Environmental Community Grants and Environment Summit. That be you, David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this report contains 2 requests for allocation of funding of 4 requests that you have before you tonight. So the first one is an extension of our environmental community grants programme. The committee allocated £20,000 from our environmental sustainability reserve last year. This has been a really successful scheme, a small grant scheme, grants up to £1,000. And we've given 21 grants out in the first year of the project, or just under a year of the project. The details of the grant remain to be unchanged there in the report for you. They're small grants really to engage small community groups in delivering environmental projects. And the vast majority of these have actually been biodiversity projects, as you see from the appendix. Things like kitchen gardens at schools, insect houses, birds, etc. For the meeting in person, we were hoping to have some photographs of some of the projects to hand around, and certainly can provide that to members at a later date if that would be helpful. So I won't go into a huge amount of detail other than to say they've been very successful, and the proposal before you is recommending that you allocate another £20,000 to enable this small grant scheme to continue. And the second request within this report, also within our sustainability action plan, as well as the grants, is that we hold a sustainability summit. So we have an event planned for September of this year. The intention is to engage as many local stakeholders as we can. It's about promoting the council's environmental sustainability strategy, but equally about bringing various interested parties and stakeholders together. As we know, our challenge to take the city to carbon neutral will require everybody to be involved. It's not something the council can do on its own. So we're planning a major event. So it's a request here that £5,000 is allocated to go towards putting that event on. I think it might be useful at this stage to just draw members' attention to the financial implications, where there's a table of the allocations and recommended allocations from the sustainability budget. So £20,000 was approved last year and has been spent on the community grants. There's a piece of work going on to allocate and spend the £20,000 that's been previously approved. That was referenced in the previous report around the biodiversity management plans. This proposal for £20,000 and for community grants, 5,000 is the residual really amount, which will see the entire 100,000 used up. The event will cost a little bit more than £5,000. And then there are 2 more papers that are before you tonight that Kevin and myself will talk to, which will give you that overall total. But I thought it just helpful to give you that overview while we go through the first paper. So, Chair, I think that's probably all I need to say would like to say on this paper at the moment. Very good project, the community grants, and the summit, I'm sure, is going to be an excellent event for the city. I'm very happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, David. Zoe, I can see your hand up. Would you like to?
I was just intrigued by the community grant scheme and wanted to know, clearly you spent all the money last year. Were you oversubscribed? Did you have to make decisions? How did you advertise it? Just sort of that feeling of what sort of sense did you get? Clearly you think there's enough need out there to continue it.
Yeah, it was advertised through our usual sort of channels. You know, social media is very powerful these days. I think a number of schools on the schools network took up the opportunity. So there's quite a number of schools you'll see with sort of forest schools, kitchen gardens, bird boxes, insect houses, etc. We had a couple of grants applications that weren't eligible because they didn't meet the criteria. 20,000 was about right for last year. I'm confident that there will be a demand for that over this coming 12 months, and 20,000 seems to be about the right level to pitch it. We may be slightly oversubscribed, we may be slightly under, but I think we'll be somewhere around that 20,000.
I'm just wondering, if people were eligible the last time, are they eligible again this time? Because is it going to go to the same people, or are you going to be able to get a wider variety of people involved?
So the conditions of the grant have allowed people to apply for up to 2 grants in a financial year. Only 1 grant per individual project. So if previous applicants come forward with a new project, then that would be assessed as a new application. We will publicise it again. I'm sure it'll be publicised following this meeting, assuming that this members support this. So I would hope that we will get some more applicants. Claire's got her hand up. She's been closely involved in delivery of the scheme, so I think she's got some detail to add.
Yes, I just want to say it was a very popular scheme. So it went live in November of last year. By the end of March, all of the funding had been allocated. We were inundated with people who wanted to apply, and since the fund closed at the end of March, we've been approached by several more organisations who want to apply as well.
And just to add, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we wanted the photos at the meeting, just to give members a more, a better feel for how the first tranche had been spent, and give more confidence and feedback of how it went. But unfortunately, we can do that this evening. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really interesting report, and it's great to see the stuff that's happening across the community, especially the particular preponderance of schemes associated with schools. The comment Claire's just made about how quickly the application limit was taken up does beg the question: are we comfortable that the amount of money that we're allocating here is actually enough to cover the level of interest which we expect to generate? And if we hit that level quickly, how do we stand about coming back to this issue with potentially adding to it?
Thank you, Councillor Croney. With any of our grant schemes, we are trying to, I think, sort of make an estimate of what the demand is going to be. It's a decision for members as to how council funding is allocated. This committee has the environmental sustainability budget available. There is, to my knowledge, there isn't another budget to fund this mid-year. So it's a matter for members as to whether 20,000 seems an appropriate amount to allocate to this particular project. It's a difficult question to answer fully, because we don't know how many applicants we will get. I think some of our other grants and our small grant schemes will get oversubscribed on an annual basis occasionally, and it may be that applicants will need to wait and they'll be at the head of the queue for the following financial year if the scheme's continued. I'm sorry, I'm not really able to give you a definite answer as to that.
Thank you, David. Marjorie?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to talk about this scheme alongside the community grant scheme. There's two main points, really. First of all, we have a separate fund and separate process. And I just wonder whether we need that. And if we're going to have one, have we thought through the logic of why it should be separate? And I think that in many cases, an application that came to this scheme for biodiversity projects would be eligible for a small grant as well, or not as well, but instead of. So it just seems to me like we've got some kind of slightly messy overlap, and it could do with a bit of thinking about. And the other thing I wanted to say was that I'm actually one of the councillors who sit on the community grants panel, and I wondered whether there's any councillor involvement in the decision making for these grants, and should there be?
Okay.
So I think to answer that question, this is a very small grant scheme. It's £1,000. It was agreed by this committee in July last year to set this up as a, I think it's probably right to say, a parallel grant scheme, but specifically focused on environmental sustainability. The criteria, yeah. the criteria are specified. They're very clear. It's delegated to our Director of Finance to sign off the final award for each one of them. It's triaged by officers in the first place. It works quite smoothly. Member involvement is, of course, a matter for members to decide. The paper I've brought today hasn't proposed any changes to the grant scheme. We could go away and look at that if members were so minded and come back again with some more detail. The proposal is that we continue with the grant scheme that's been successful as is and top up the fund. But that's really a matter for members as to the governance process around this.
Simon?
Yes, I just think it might help to inform members around that decision, if we do want to make a decision on that basis, if we were to have some information about how many applications were made and how many were turned down, just to give us a general view of what the level of interest is, and whether we should be enhancing the scheme financially, and whether there is any helpful input that councillors could add to the approval process. It's quite difficult to weigh this up without that information. Perhaps officers could email us that at some point. It would be interesting to know how many applications were turned down at the sort of early stages.
Yeah. So I think through you, Chair, I think I can answer that second question probably with the help of Claire, but I think Lloyd wanted to come in on the governance question.
Yes, Lloyd, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, David. Yeah, just to support what David is saying, really, I think we're at risk of comparing apples with pears. The small community grants pot has now gone up to £80,000. The maximum grant is £5,000. So it's quite a bit more than the current environment grants. That process works really well. It's a different set of criteria that we're looking at, and we've got people ingrained in community looking at community grants, and people ingrained in sustainability looking at environmental grants. So for me, it's a little bit of why look to fix it if it's not broke. However, it's absolutely members' call, because one of the things that we are keen to do as officers is to try and simplify the process as much as possible. But I think there is a big difference in much smaller environmental grants being able to be determined far more quickly than a member panel, which I believe is convened sort of periodically throughout the year.
Okay, David, did you want to come back in with answering?
Yeah, so I think the numbers that were rejected were very small. There was a couple that weren't eligible really. I think that the application wasn't right for this environmental sustainability grant. As it was, the grant was due to close at the end of March. I remember Claire and I having a discussion probably 6 weeks before. We weren't sure if we were going to be over or undersubscribed. As it was, we came in just about bang on. I think there might be one or two that had started to express an interest that would come into the following year.
Yeah.
Is that correct, Claire? Do you want to come and add to that?
Yes, that's correct. So there are only 3 or 4 approaches which weren't eligible, and that was mainly because they were outside the Worcester area, so they didn't meet the criteria. But I think part of the success is down to the fact that it has been promoted specifically as an environmental grant. So I contacted all schools in Worcester and made them aware of this grant. And I think if we promoted it as a general community grant, they might not have had the impetus that they did to take action.
Thank you. Well, I think from my perspective, we had this scheme last year, which actually the committee approved, and it's on the back of that success that we're basically saying, look, let's do it again. And as Lloyd said, it's officers and myself are happy that the processes that we have work really well, and it's just such a shame we don't have the photographic evidence that we're going to pass around. We couldn't put them in the pack or send them around because there was in some cases school children and so on in the photos we didn't have permission to sort of send electronically, but we could have passed around the committee table. And if we want to change the amount upwards, then we're starting to unpick the whole budget, because we've got 100k. It's all allocated tonight with the papers that are coming, and if we would end up sort of trying to sort of unpick and rebuild it on the fly, which I think could have implications on the overall program. I think the bigger question will be for the budget process, which kicks off in the autumn, is that we basically, what do we want as a follow-on budget? So we've had this 100k that was, officers might want to correct me if I'm wrong, but we've had it for over 2 years now, and we've sort of slowly released funding for a whole range of projects, and it might be that in the autumn, in the budget process, we go back to in that budgeting process, we go back and say, can we have an additional budget to carry on with a future selection of projects, of which this community grants might be something that we do again. Simon.
Yeah, I just wanted to put you out of your misery there, Andy. I've heard enough to be completely convinced that this is working well and really doesn't need any improvement. It's a really nice scheme, and I'm very pleased with this. So it's got my total support. Well done.
Thank you. I just want to welcome Andy Roberts to the meeting. So everyone great. He's there for votes and so on. Marjorie.
Thank you, Chair. It is obviously a good scheme, but I just think that it would be. I think it would be. I think it could be even better with say one councillor helping to make the decisions, and that one councillor could rotate, and I should imagine that councillors would find it interesting. I certainly would myself. So it's something to think about. But if the majority think that it's not needed, then fine.
Okay. So if we've got no more comments, are we happy to go to the vote? So the recommendation. So agenda item 7, recommendation 1.1 is that the Environment Committee agrees an allocation of £20,000 to extend the Environmental Community Grants Programme as proposed in the budget, as proposed in this report. And 1.2, that the committee agrees an allocation of £5,000 to support the Environmental Summit planned for September. We're happy to take those together. Yep. Okay, so all those in favour?
Got 9 there, Chair. Andy, Councillor Roberts, are you?
I
Paul?
think, having not heard the debate, I'm fully supportive, but having not heard the debate, I think I better abstain.
Okay, but it's carried anyway, Chair. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Now on to agenda item 8, which is the Wild About Worcester wildlife walking routes. And David, is it yourself?
Yes, and well pronounced. I've just realised how difficult the subject title of this report is to say. So members will recall that the Worcester Environmental Group actually came to this committee and spoke about this proposal. So I'm assuming that members are reasonably well versed in this proposal. It was a proposal for the Worcester Environmental Group working with on-site advocacy to create a 12-mile walking loop around the city that includes as many areas of biodiversity and wildlife to engage people with nature. The committee received a presentation back in March from Paul Snooks, and there was a potential map was shown, and there's a link to that within this. At that discussion, actually, and some of the discussions we've had since, it was noted that this is very much a route that runs to the east of the city, and there was some discussion about why it hadn't engaged on the west side of the city. Certainly some discussions we've had are that moving across the Diglis Bridge, we've got Sabrina Bridge, we've got a new bridge proposed to the north at Gulliver as part of our town investment plan package supporting the county council. There's certainly potential to extend across to the west of the river as well. I think one of the things about it is a 12-mile loop. So for those enthusiasts that are going to walk 12 miles in one go, it'll be possible to join the loop, walk all the way around and finish and pick up your mode of sustainable transport at the other end and return home. Equally, for many other people, it may be short elements of this route are more appropriate locally. So whilst the details of the exact routes are in pencil, I think at the moment, and work's ongoing with a steering group of which Claire sits on that and officers sit on that steering group. The principle, I think, is one that's been widely supported by members. So WEG has presented a proposal that includes waymarking of the route, a fairly simple waymarking of the route. Interpretation boards pointing out areas of particular interest around nature and biodiversity. Over a period of time, there'll be accessibility improvements, creation of a website, some engagement activities. A lot of the work will be done by volunteers, but WEG's estimated that somewhere between £10,000 and £15,000 is required to deliver the majority of this work. So the proposal for you tonight is that an allocation of £15,000 up to £15,000 would be made from the Environmental Sustainability Reserve. We've had discussions with Chair and Vice Chair about the content of this. Clearly, if the Council's funding waymarking, design, interpretation boards, then we would want to be satisfied that that was appropriate use of public funds, that the design was sympathetic to the city, etc. So there would be a final sign-off. This would be an allocation of a maximum amount of funding that would be used on a element by element basis rather than a full grant to the organisation of 15,000. I hope I've explained that in the correct way. We would like to retain some control about the detail as things are procured. So the second part of the recommendation notes is the committee notes that specification would be signed off subject to approval by the corporate director in consultation with the chair and vice chair. So I'm happy to take any more questions about the detail of the project. I hope members are fairly well versed in this, and I would put that recommendation to you, and happy to take questions.
Okay, just like to add, I also sit on the steering group, so we've got quite a few council officers and myself. So we've got a lot of oversight and involvement in this project. Do we have any questions or queries? Robin?
Thank you, Chair. It's not clear to me. Right, sorry, let's start with this one again. On the way marking, I remember from the briefing that Paul gave us, this was pre the committee meeting briefing, that there were issues with some stretches of the Wildabout Worcester Way in that they weren't accessible. So if we're going to way mark those, I just wonder about the usefulness of that, if you see what I mean. Like Cherry Orchard, there's no path, there's no friendly path for wheelchair users, for instance.
Yeah, if I can pick up, I mean that's a very specific example and a good one, that within the town investment plan active travel project there is a surface path to go south from Diglis Bridge through parts of Cherry Orchard, down to Dace Close and over the Duck Brook and join up there. So that would be one element. I think probably a fairly light touch in terms of way marking. I mean,
Right.
there's lots of digital maps available these days. We don't need to have lots of maps around. If you're at Diglis, you probably only need a couple of pointers to get you to Gulliver Park really from there. So it'll be fairly light touch. Certainly the accessibility is something that will need to be worked on over a period of time. Some areas clearly are more challenging than others to make accessible. But this is one of the reasons that we want to maintain this officer and member delegation to approve the detail.
I mean, I only mentioned Cherry Orchard because that
Yep.
was one that stuck out in my
Yes.
mind. But I mean, I genuinely have concerns about the Canal Towpath stretch, and there are some areas of Warndon villages where it's not exactly, you know, wheelchair friendly, for instance. So, you know, I'm just expressing concern about that accessibility option. And I hear what you say about, you know, increasing the path to be more inclusive of west of the river as well. So that would be particularly welcome.
I'd just like to add to that. I think it's a case of getting the route established, marked, and into existence, and then to start on the improvements in terms of accessibility and the wilding. So it's not something that's going to be complete all in one go, but it's about getting it established as a route, and then getting it going, and then through time improving it in any way we can, but with obviously a big emphasis on the nature and biodiversity. Andy, Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm absolutely fully supportive of this. Not just because it's a good environmental measure, which it is that, but it gives access to the biodiversity that we're trying to improve. And I'm sorry if I'm telling you what you already know, but we do know that it will enhance public health, enhance public cohesion, and actually public involvement. So here's my plea. Having been involved with, remember it used to be Warren Villages, and that before it was Worcester. The one thing that's helped WEG be successful is the sort of light touch that's just been referred to. I'm not talking about light touch as far as indications concerned. I'm talking light touch with committees. These people do not want to be bogged down with committees and minutiae. They want to get on with the work. I went to another council's meeting about environmental stuff, and there, at the end of it, they decided they're going to have subcommittees and committees and all sorts. And nothing came of it. But I could see the people from the WEG actually cringing at this. They need to be thrown the captain's shirt and let them get on with it. But I realise that the city council's put a funding in, so there's got to be some restrictions. But my plea is for it to be light touch as far as committees are concerned.
Thank you, Andy. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from what Robin said, this is a very good scheme, and I have got some concern though about what's been said about leaving out large sections of the West Bank. Now, I know from what the officers David Sutton said that we're looking towards that in the future, but it is a third of the city without very much being touched on our side of the river. There is fantastic walkways which would enable linkage from the Douglas Bridge all the way through the Monarch's Way, through following the River Team and following the Lawnbrook, which would link up into the Lawnbrook Nature Reserve. Almost fantastic places. Almost all of them fantastic places which could be part of this route, and I'm looking forward to the future of them being included. And can we potentially have some sort of assurance that we will be remembered when we come to the future? I know from what David has said that we're not being completely forgotten, but to be honest, it feels like it.
Yeah, I've been championing that element within the steering group. You can see Claire nodding. So I'm on board with it, and I'm more than happy for that to be minuted. That the council would want to see an extension or a secondary loop that brings in the whole of the city by incorporating the west side. So if we can, Margaret, minute that was a request from the committee. That will help, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Very much appreciate your help and support with this. I don't want to be negative. I want to be positive about things, and you just allowed me to be even more positive.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things that if we all want everything all at once, then we'll probably end up with nothing. So we need to move forward in stages. So Zoe.
I just wanted to echo Richard's point. As a resident of Westside, we do feel like we get overlooked a lot of the time. So yes, it's nice to see that you are actually actively championing that, and I'd like to make sure that does get put in the minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Any more? No. Okay. On that basis, then, are we happy to move to the vote on the recommendations? I won't read them all out, but as laid out in 1.1 and 1.2 on agenda item 8. So all those in favour?
Nine. Councillor Roberts?
I think I got a thumb up, or did have until.
Oh, sorry. Then that's carried. 10. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. On to agenda item 9, which is the potential for investment in additional photovoltaic panels at St Martin's Gate multi-storey car park. So is this for Kevin to?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. As I'm sure most, if not all of you know, there's an array of photovoltaics on the roof level of St Martin's Gate. I mean, very simplistically, it's a carport structure with PV panels on it. That's been operational since March 2019, since when it's generated electricity worth around £15,000 at historic prices, and we've received the benefit of feed-in tariff payments as well. But there's certainly room, there's capacity for 5 times the size of the existing array on the roof level of St Martin's Gate. And Property Services has done some very rough kind of calculations and estimates, and that potentially for a cost of estimated around £400,000, there could be, I said 5 times the number of photovoltaics could generate around £40,000 a year in terms of current electricity, what we pay for unit electricity prices. Now, obviously, that price is due to go up very significantly this year and beyond. So the return is very likely to increase. So the report, we feel confident enough to recommend that it is worth commissioning an outline business case to kind of work on that further to be more certain of the costs of doing this and the returns, and obviously the structural capability of the car park to take that and work through sort of other issues. So the recommendation is to commission that outline business case to be funded with the use of a maximum of 20,000 from the Environmental Sustainability Reserve to fund that outline business case and any necessary surveys and further structural investigations that may be required to come forward with a recommendation back to this committee in due course.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Do we have any questions or comments from members? I'm getting nothing. So hopefully that assumes that everybody's happy with it. In which case, let's if everyone's happy, let's move to the vote, which is as laid out in recommendation in 1.1 and 1.2 of agenda item 9. So all those in favour?
Councillor Cleary, thank you. That's a carried, Chair. Thank you, 10.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kevin. On to agenda item 10, which is the Q1 performance report. Lloyd, are you leading on this one?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Again, Chair, I'll be very, very brief. So this is the Q1 performance report for this committee, the first one for this financial year. Again, the key projects and the key performance indicators were signed off at the prior committee, so members should recognise them. What we tend to look for in these reports, Chair, is lots of green, or worst case yellow. So members will see yellows and greens splattered across both the key projects and the key PIs. And there'll be narrative against each one, giving some further information. The one I would draw your attention to, Chair, is the red key performance indicator. And I would ask Sandra just to come in on the back of me, Chair, just to let members know what we are doing to rectify some of the less than satisfactory performance around litter and dog bins, because I know some members have raised this with us on a one-to-one basis as well. So I think that's the one I'll focus on, Chair, and then we can move into any questions. So Sandra, can I hand over to you for litter and dog bins?
You certainly can. We've obviously had a little bit of turnaround of staff and some issues around recruitment, which has obviously exacerbated the rounds. However, we've put a plan together now over the next 4 weeks where we've increased that capacity from existing resources across the whole of city services. So by joining us all together early this year, it's made us be able to enhance that offer, and we're going to monitor it very closely, Matt Bayliss, the service manager, and myself, to make sure that we are hitting our straps on that one, because we have had concerns. I've also reintroduced city centre walks with myself and the supervisor so that we can get a feel of where the areas have got the most footfall, etc. Although at this moment in time I'm slightly incapacitated with my ankle, but yeah, that's something that we've started again to make sure that we are obviously hitting the areas of greatest concern. So we're hopeful that obviously we've seen this blip in first quarter, but moving on from here, the things that we've put in place, the extra resources, looking at that route planning and the rotas, so that it hits the areas of most usage, should give us a better outcome in Q2 and they're on for the rest of the year.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions from members? Andy?
It's not so much, but we added a little hiccup locally, and the team really pulled out all the stops and have put things right, and for which I'm very grateful.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Do we have Anything else? So are we happy to note the performance report? Yep. Thank you. And where's my agenda? So I think that's the last main item. There is no AOB, so that's the end of the meeting. So thank you all very much, and I'm very pleased it only took an hour and a quarter. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Good night.